Okay, I make it 10 o'clock. We've got a nice light agenda today, and it's light because we were meant to be having the workshop, which has been moved. But it means that we should be able to rattle through this quite quickly. Besides, you know full well I like a light agenda, so we can actually do a bit more of a deeper dive anyway. I'm just going to do a quick roll call then, and in no particular order. So I'll pick on Pauline as my vice chair. Pauline, are you here?
Good morning, I'm here.
Good morning, Pauline. Tony Alford.
Good morning, present.
Pete Barrow.
Morning, I'm here.
Morning. Tony Coombs.
Morning, I'm here.
Hi, Tony. Beryl Azard.
Good morning, I'm here.
Hi, Beryl. Ryan.
Morning, I'm here.
Yeah, thought you might be. Stella.
Good morning.
Rebecca Knox.
Yeah, here, thank you.
There you go. And do I have to call out Daryl's name as well? It's like going back to school, isn't it? Calling out names. I thought you might be present. Which brings me to apologies, and I think we've got a full house, haven't we? Which is always nice. Thank you.
Yeah, no apologies, Chairman.
No apologies. Yeah, I've gone through it all. Declarations of interest. Does any member have any declaration that they of interest that they wish to make? No, that's good. And public participation. I know that we have no questions or statements submitted, which brings us into agenda item 4, which is the new Domestic Abuse Act. I've got Graham Card-Jones here as the portfolio holder, who's going to introduce the item with Andy Frost, and then I've got Molly Rennie here as well as the domestic abuse champion that's also going to speak to it as well. So I'll tell you what then, if I bring in Graham, I'm assuming you're here. Graham, are you in? Do you want to introduce?
Hi, morning, Chair. I've got, if Andy's here, I'm going to actually hand straight over to him because I've come hot-footing out straight out of another meeting. So if Andy would like to present, I'll be
That's
more
cheating, Councillor Card-Jones, but yeah, go for it. Andy, Frosty, are you around as well then?
Okay, I'll make a start. So I'm sure everyone on the committee is aware that tackling domestic abuse has been a significant priority for partners in Dorset for a really long time, 15, 20 years, I think. And an awful lot of good work's been done. There's a strong commitment and good working relationship between partners, but problems of domestic abuse still continue as they do nationally. And one key challenge we've faced over the years is that tackling domestic abuse isn't currently a legal requirement. The Domestic Abuse Bill, which is currently making its way through Parliament, is looking to change that. Now, the bill's at its final stages of the parliamentary process. It's currently going through the House of Lords, and it contains a number of requirements that will help clarify responsibilities, expectations and governance. So even though the bill is going through Parliament and changes are being made to the proposed legislation, it's certainly not finalised at this point. The plan is for it to become law in April this year, so it's a really fast turnaround. By that time, it will be the Domestic Abuse Act. And based on our current understanding, there's already a number of potential implications for local authorities and Dorset Council that are called up in that bill. The reason the report's coming to this committee is because it's one part of the Council's formal Crime and Disorder Committee, which we have to have legally. The other part of that committee is the People and Health Scrutiny Committee, and they tend to look at what we've done retrospectively. And we took an annual community safety scrutiny report to that committee recently. Lots in there about our work on domestic abuse. Councillor Molly Rennie was very involved in that, and I know Councillor Rennie's on the meeting today as the A champion, but also vice chair of that committee. And we did a lot of work around looking at our domestic abuse offer, high-risk domestic abuse service, and so on. So the point of this report is to explain what's going on with the bill and the work we're trying to do to prepare for that as best we can, given what we know so far. So I'll just briefly talk about the detail of the bill. Preparations for it locally are being managed through the Dorset Community Safety Partnership, which is our statutory partnership. We've got an action plan, which has been included in the papers. Things do keep changing and developing. This is moving quickly, so that plan is constantly being updated. The council's senior leadership team have also been made aware of everything that's going on, as have individual services that we believe will be affected directly by the new legislation. The main issues for local authorities and Dorset Council are set out in Part 4 of the bill and at 12.3 in your report. I won't go through them all, but some of the most significant ones are about appointing a domestic abuse local partnership board and producing a strategy for the provision of accommodation-based support. We don't have huge amounts of detail around that at the moment. There is statutory guidance out, but it's in draft and it can change. But the government has indicated it wants those things to be in place by August. So again, a short timescale given we don't know some of the fine detail. You'll have picked up that in the bill there's a big focus for local authorities on support in safe accommodation and homelessness issues, and that's really important, but it's only one part of our work around domestic abuse. As well as emergency accommodation, the council commissions community-based support, advice and information, outreach support, counselling, group work, and is also involved in wider work such as perpetrator programmes, training and awareness raising. And we help bring coordination to our partnership work on this. There's been lots of lobbying nationally to try and recognise that wider work in the bill. And I actually received a letter yesterday saying that the government has tabled some amendments to the bill at the Lords stage, which seem to incorporate some responsibilities around community safety, community-based support, which is really good. That's what we want. So locally, the council and its partners have a big focus on prevention around domestic abuse. We want to stop it from happening in the first place, not just respond to things when people have become a victim or a perpetrator. And you'll see in the report that you've got, the Community Safety Partnership has a position statement on domestic abuse. It's at 1310 in your report, which focuses on prevention, supporting victims and managing offenders. And to quickly give some examples of the work that's going on around early intervention, we're working with the police around rolling out Operation Encompass, which is about making sure schools are aware if the police have attended a domestic abuse incident where there's a child in the house, so they can provide the correct support to the child. We have an extensive training programme for staff across many agencies, not just the council, but health and police and others, including social care, so they understand domestic abuse issues and how to respond. There's a variety of services. I've mentioned about accommodation and community-based support, but there's also perpetrator and education programmes. And we've done things that are particularly required in Dorset as well. So we have an isolated community project, which is about reaching out to communities that are harder to reach sometimes and more isolated. And that's about recruiting volunteers to understand domestic abuse issues and help signpost people when they need support. One of the things that I think we've done really well of in Dorset is around our high risk work. And nationally, there's a multi-agency risk assessment conferences where partners come together to talk about those most high risk cases and agree kind of joint actions around that. The national model is that meets monthly. Due to a number of things that we've discovered in Dorset, we didn't feel that was sufficient. So we now have those meetings, those sort of case meetings 4 days a week with a monthly meeting to kind of pick up any issues that aren't immediate. And that's a real credit to partners in Dorset to have moved on that. It means that people aren't waiting to get that kind of intervention. It's happening almost immediately. And we've also done a big push on whole family working through dedicated conferences and events. And the high risk domestic abuse project's a really good example of where that comes to life. So you'll have children's social care, adult social care, police, health, sitting in the same meeting, talking about the same cases and sharing information and collectively looking at what we do. So there's a huge amount goes on around domestic abuse locally by the council and its partners, and we just need to make sure that we recognise all of that when developing our strategies around domestic abuse and responding to the bill. We mustn't narrow things, we need to build on what we've done. Finally, touching briefly on finance, it does say this in the report, but each tier 1 local authority was given £50,000 by central government to prepare for the bill. A bit of a steer on that around writing needs assessments and strategies. The strategy, the statutory guidance hasn't come out on that yet, so that's a bit tricky to do. But also our wish is to get that into the most effective area by whether that's training or upskilling people as much as possible. And the latest announcement from central government is that it's going to give Dorset Council £650,000 in new burdens funding to help deliver the duties under Part 4, which is about provision of support within safe accommodation. We don't have very much detail on that yet, and we need to understand that detail before we can start planning for how we use that money and whether or not it's recurring and so on. But it's good, and it's encouraging that the government's recognising that there are extra costs and they're helping to provide those extra costs in relation to the new duties. I'll leave it there, Chair, because I'm sure you'd like to have a discussion on some of the detail of that, and I'm happy to take questions.
Yeah, fab. Thank you, Andrew. That's really concise. Thank you. I'm going to bring in Councillor Molly Rennie, MBE, for services to victims of domestic abuse and violence. Molly, would you like to speak as well as the Council's domestic abuse champion?
Thank you very much, and thank you.
Very formal. Okay.
It was very formal. That's unusual for me. Thank you very much indeed, and thanks, Andy. Andy has painted such a good picture, and when you actually sit and listen how much as a local authority we've done and how far we've come forward on this journey to support and to help both victims and perpetrators and the wider family, it's just incredible when you sit and listen to this. One of the things I did want to say at 14.2, it says the words, there's a little, what's the word, graph, a table, and it talks about we've only had 23% increase over the last year of people reporting incidents. But I think that word only, please disregard that word only. When you think of only, it means a small group to me, but those people will have had to deal with the pandemic and being locked in with the perpetrator. So an increase of 23% to me is an enormous increase, because the fact that they've had to actually physically find a way of making that call to ask for support and help is just amazing. And also many incidents will have happened before they've actually made that. The average is 38 times is there an incident before somebody reports. Interestingly, You First, who deliver the integrated service, told us at the forum last week that they've had an increase in calls of people asking for help of 79%. We as a council were able to help them with some funding to bring in some more SPOC work to be able to manage the calls better, because the National Helpline Refuge, they actually crashed a couple of times during the whole of the lockdown because the calls were so enormous, more than 100% increase they faced. So we've done very, very well in Dorset, and we should take credit for that, for the team. We're busy thanking everybody, and I think we forget the work that Andy and his team and housing have done, and the people who are delivering the service. And I would like somewhere within this report to recognise that and to say thank you to that team for the work that they've delivered, and the stress that that's brought to them, because you're dealing with crisis, and remember they're all working from home as well. The DA bill will bring some statutory services to us for the first time. Andy talked about how much we've done over the past 17 years. We're just very lucky, despite not having that statutory duty for many years. We've managed to provide DA services, even including accommodation-based services, and some of this new burden funding will assist with this. Andy mentioned it's a new funding stream and it's light on information at the moment, not much detail, and we don't even know if it's a one-off or if it'll come for a few more years. And already people will be thinking of requests to us for how they can get some funding, because the services that have been delivered over the past years by local authorities and charities and third sector organisations, they've always been funded by grants and one-off funding pots, and you've had to make bids for all of this money, and often services who are working together at the coalface are bidding against each other for this funding. And I think we should never lose sight of the fact that, and Andy also again touched on this, without these community-based services alongside the commission services, we will not be able to manage to deliver and continue to deliver the excellent services that we've become known for in Dorset. And I think part of the issue will be the stretch on us to deliver the promises that have been made within that new bill. So we've got to find a way to make domestic abuse part of our core service. I would like us as a council to move forward to see that line in our budget as we're moving forward into not this year's budget, obviously, but next year's budget. We need to see that line there so we know that we've got that continued support and the money's there. The bill's not complete at the moment, as Andy said, and also this week 2 new duties were added to it, which were the threat of sharing intimate images and non-fatal strangulation. Gosh knows why that was never in. When you ask women if they have been threatened, throttled, strangulated, thousands of women talk about that, and it's never been a law. It's very rare to be able to play such a huge part in making these laws and new laws themselves. And I'd like to thank anybody on the council who actually signed. I know I'm a bit boring about this, but I sent out the petition about NFS, non-fatal strangulation, quite a few times. So thank you to any of you who signed it. At 13.6, we talk about the work that we deliver here and the challenges ahead, and everybody's ready to do that. But again, I mentioned earlier on the work that Andy's team has done and housing, and I would hope that within the recommendation you can add in some words of thanks for our own staff and those staff delivering the service, because they've saved many lives, and more so this year. Many challenges ahead. And we're using a Boris word, which is unusual for me, but this bill will sort of set the route map ahead for us, and we'll know which journey we're going to take. I feel proud to just be part of that journey and have been involved with DA for so many years. This is a bit like a miracle moment to see these new laws coming in place. I'm happy to answer any questions if Andy and I together anything that you need later. I'm done.
Thank you, Molly. That was really useful. And thank you for your work on that. I'll tell you what we'll do is when we come to recommend the recommendations, we'll just add in thanks for Andy and the team, but we'll do that formally later. Can I have
Thank you.
Do we have any questions for or any comments from members regarding the bill? There we go, Daryl, he's first in there. Councillor Turner.
Andrew, thank you. Let me just get the paper up. I was looking at 13.2 on page 16. Because basically initially it talks about the new board being coordinated by the Dorset CSP. And at 13.2 it shows the CSP's partners. And I feel if there's one weakness in this, it's the available properties for victims of abuse. So shouldn't housing associations be at the table? And that's the question. Thank you.
That's a really good point, Daryl. I tell you what, if I pick on Andy Frost, Frosty.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So although the list at 3.2 sets out the people that legally need to be around the table, there are other people involved in the community safety partnership. So it's one of those things, Chair, where in law, that's who needs to be around the table, and that forms the legal basis of the partnership. But certainly on our community safety partnership, Andrew Villany, who's the corporate director for housing and community safety, is involved, and we have other people involved in that work as well. That's kind of the minimum, as opposed to showing the true extent of who's involved in the work. And it's a good point. We work really closely with a really wide range of agencies and organisations on this. And one example of that in terms of the housing stuff is that during the first lockdown, we worked really closely with housing colleagues to make sure that people that were in emergency accommodation around domestic abuse and who were waiting for longer term accommodation were able to get that longer term accommodation so that we could free up bed spaces. So yeah, it looks quite narrow at 13.2, but there's a wide range of people involved, and they're all very committed.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I think Daryl has raised a really good point there, and I think it's also about that buy-in, isn't it? Because fundamentally, a lot of the legislation is about housing and accommodation. So I think we just need to get that message across to our housing associations. Councillor Stella Jones.
Yeah, I think this is good news, this bill. Having worked with Molly for many, many years on domestic abuse problems, it seems like at last that it's being taken seriously. And I think we often forget the effect on children of domestic abuse in families. And I'm very worried that once children go back to school, they will then have a chance to talk to their teachers and their other staff that they trust, and we'll find there is a peak again in domestic abuse issues coming from children, but the whole family is obviously involved. And I wonder if we're prepared for that peak.
Again, another good point, Stella. We're quite lucky here because we've also got Mark Blackman. So I'll tell you what, if I go to Andy, and then if Mark Blackman wants to interject, that'd be useful. Frosty.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to reassure really that we are aware of that potential issue. We're having fortnightly meetings with our community safety partners, including Children's Services and the police, and are doing what we can to prepare for any. There is a risk, a concern that potentially, as you say, once children start going back to school and we have better sight on things, then we hear about things, and we are preparing for that as best we can within our services. Mark might be able to say a bit more about the specifics within Children's, but certainly we're conscious of it and we're doing what we can in terms of preparation.
Excellent. Mark, I'll ask you to come in then if he wants to add to Andy.
Thank you, Chair. Really just wanted to reassure that we've done an enormous amount of work with our schools to keep eyes on our children during the lockdown, particularly focusing on our vulnerable children, to make sure that we are in a position where we're understanding some of those contextual things for young people and their families. Equally, as schools come back, what we want to be in a position to be able to do is to respond to need very quickly. So all of our schools have a link worker who will work closely with the school to be able to help and guide and support. What we don't want is, if you like, for our front door to be blown over by the demand. And our experience last time children returned was we didn't see an enormous peak, but we did see an increase in questions and activity, but we were able to manage that by working really closely within the system. So we are fully prepared. We have staff in place and we have those systems and processes, not just those, but also the kind of back work has already been done to help our head teachers and our school leaders and our Senkos in schools to understand what's the right response, what's the way in which we can manage this together as a system. So it's a watching and waiting brief, of course, but we aren't expecting anything that is disproportionate to what happened last time children returned to school.
Cheers, Mark. Thank you. I knew it would be useful for you coming in today. Molly, do you want to just quickly add on a comment onto that?
Yes, and also, for those who are not aware, I chair the Domestic Abuse Forum, which is made up of so many partners, and a lot of organisations have had funding and made funding bids and do work with children. Organisations such as STARS, New Waves, the Family Partnership Zone are looking at a new course of ways of working with children, because there's never a one size fits all, and there's so many offers now out there that we would never have believed, and teachers are very, very involved now with this as well. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Rebecca Knox. Councillor Knox, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just going to, it's a fantastic piece of work, and I hope what I'm going to say is actually going to be helpful, ensuring that this work and this policy area is given the due credit that it needs going forward, and that's to pick up on the section. It's section 3. It's the wellbeing and health implications line. I think that line is actually understating what we're trying to achieve here. It can be and should be linked to our performance indicators on health and wellbeing for Dorset. So maybe this is work going forward. But I would have liked to have seen a much sort of more directed line at the achievement that this will do to address health inequalities, the emotional well-being of young people, and in fact all ages, and where that will fit in, as I just said, into our performance indicator, because this is a corporate goal, health and well-being improvement. This is very much key, because it is, as Andy said earlier, this is really early prevention at scale across the whole of the county. So perhaps just a little bit more on that. Maybe it's working in line at the moment.
Fab, thanks, Rebecca. Andy, do you want to just touch on that? Because I'd like to add actually to Rebecca's points, because I think Rebecca's raised a really good point there. And I think that if we take it further, but also perhaps twist it around a bit, if we're looking at data, I think that it's really important that we have our goals in there, but also how we look at data. Now, there are several organisations in there that have a lot of data. So I'm always really worried about being so reliant on police data, especially when it comes to domestic abuse, because it doesn't really create the whole picture. And I think that's why we need the buy-in from people like the CCG and our NHS Trust to be able to share things like the Cardiff model data. So when you've got a DA victim going into hospital, coming forwards and saying, you know, because that will be recorded there, but it won't necessarily be recorded as a police incident. So I tell you what, I'm really lucky. I tell you what, super lucky today, because we've got Andrea Breen as well here. So Andrea, I'm gonna pick on you. Could you touch on Councillor Knox's question, and then perhaps also fill in a bit of my question as well, if that's all right? And then I'll go to Councillor Alford. Andrea, where are you?
I'm here. Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can see and hear me. As an observer here today. So really, I think it's important that we are correlating, as Andy has already mentioned, across different partnerships. So obviously around the Health and Wellbeing Board, but also around the Safeguarding Adults Board. And I think that collation and coordination of different dashboards across partners is going to be really important going forward. So I know that there were conversations ensuing with regards to community safety, Safeguarding Adults Board and the Children's Board as well. But it's about how we identify the most important questions for particular data sets. So I think that's certainly something that we will continue to have conversations about.
Yeah, fab. Before I go to Tony, does Andy Frost want to add anything to that?
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on Councillor Knox's first point, absolutely, we would want to link this into the work on health inequality. We know about the consequences of domestic abuse on adults and children, and we need to raise the profile of the impact of that, and we'll pick that up. Just in terms of the data, there is a lot of data out there. There is something about how well, I think there's two levels of that. There's about data when working on specific cases, and I think things like our high risk domestic abuse initiative has really helped to improve that sharing of information when it comes down to individual cases. When it comes to kind of wider data, there is something about the challenge of coordinating that across agencies better. But also for me, there's something about, you can have lots and lots of data, but you need the analysis of that data to truly understand what it's showing you. That the point of having the data is to get smarter at knowing what the issue is, so you can put the best intervention in place. So you do need that analytical capacity as well, Joe.
Okay, all right then. So being cheeky, because we can do this. So as a policy, why don't we try and push then for a joint analytical team that spreads across both the police, the CCG, and the councils, with regard to not just because that can look at DA, but also other forms of abuse. But yeah, I'm sorry, Tony. I know that I'm not ignoring you. So if that would be, if we could get that as an outcome, that would be fab. Okay, Tony Alford, Councillor Alford.
And thank you, Chairman. The first thing I'd like to say is a word of appreciation for everything that Molly has done in her capacity as an advocate in respect of domestic abuse. This is something you've done over many years, and we all appreciate everything that you have done. With this paper, what I've done is worked through the spreadsheet fairly carefully, and I have been really impressed about how comprehensive it is. There is clearly an immense amount of work to do, and I'm delighted to say that I think everyone is on the right track. There is one element that strikes me as being a priority, and this is about the local partnership board, where I think the purpose is to bring in expertise and knowledge of the subject from varying sources, and who can provide a real sense of direction on this subject. And it seems to me useful if we can get this local partnership board assembled as quickly as we are able, because I think one of the tasks that does need to be done is to develop an appropriate strategy and a reporting system, of course. And I think that this local partnership board ought to be assembled to give them the opportunity of providing input into that activity as quickly as can be done. Thank you.
Is it possible to come back on that?
Well, I'll tell you what, I was actually going to go to Andrew B, because I think he wants to make a point regarding joining up strategies, and I think he can probably answer Tony's point. But then if there's anything, and then I'll probably come to you, Andy, if that's all right. Andrew, where are you?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you see me and hear me? Just a brief point. I'll just to join up some of the dots in the answer to Councillor Knox's question. I think makes a good point about health and wellbeing priorities, and in some ways performance expectations and standards that we set. I think we're interested in getting that to work across the various strategies that we have across the council and across the partnerships, because we've got, you know, safeguarding board attention. We've got a lot of attention on this issue, but to some extent success will be how does that play out into operational plans, getting social workers, housing officers to deliver. So I'm partly stating the obvious, but I think some of it is to promote particularly the course of action we're on the path towards, is about getting that to be, I guess, in the set of performance expectations that we set across the council for various strands of work, including health and wellbeing, but could be just as much about what the new housing strategy looks like. Is it saying enough about domestic abuse? So that's to some extent. Partly, I think what Councillor Alford was saying is about making sure the partnership board is effective, but it looks across the various strands of how we operate as the council, but also as the partnership. Andy might be able to answer the other part of Councillor Alford's question.
Yeah,
Andy,
it was just to give some reassurance, really, because I think that when looking at the bill cold, and it talks about establishing a local board and a strategy and a needs assessment and so on, that can look quite new, but some of this is really quite familiar to us, certainly in Dorset, and I'm sure across the country as well. So we're really keen to not kind of create stuff which is completely new, but build on the really good work that we've done. So we do have needs assessment work. Already we have a really good understanding of our issues and needs in Dorset, and that's been developed by working really closely with frontline practitioners. And the TSP's position statement that we currently have is essentially the foundation of a strategy. We have a delivery plan that sits behind that. What in terms of the local board, the steer that I want to give to partners is that we build on our community safety partnership and develop that rather than create a separate board. What I really don't want to do is fragment things in Dorset so that we have something which is standalone and separate from our community safety partnership, which has been championing and developing this work for a long time. So I appreciate on the face of it, it can look like there's lots to do around this, but I think we've got a really solid foundation already that we need to build on just to take that forward.
Amazing, thank you, Andrew. Tony Coombs.
Morning, Chairman. I agree with everything that's been said so far, but I just wanted to pick up on one small point from the report, and that's about chapter 4 of the statutory guidance, page 27 of the report, where it talks about the education of children and young people on domestic abuse and healthy relationships. In the table, all it talks about is schools. It doesn't talk about youth centres and youth work. And seeing as I'm sat in a very cold youth centre at the moment, overseeing the refurb, it's something that is sort of quite at the forefront of my mind. We had a targeted session last night with a group of young people, and one of the things that they were requesting was a workshop on safe relationships. So there is definitely a need out there. So I would like to, see, as we look at the work streams, some support in being able to provide that for the older young people that not necessarily engaging in school or college.
Tony, I love your point. It's brilliant, and I wholeheartedly back you up on that. I'm going to go to Mark Blackman. Mark, as you're here for covering for SJ, would you like to put that through?
Yeah, thank you for raising the point, Tony. Absolutely. We certainly want to hear more from our young people in all contexts, not just in schools, and we do recognise that wider community approach to safeguarding our young people, supporting their development and their families is absolutely part of what we're doing going forward. So we are exploring different avenues by which we can bring things together. We're talking about bringing our participation work, or we are bringing our participation work in-house, so that we have better visibility on the things that we're doing as we go forwards. But certainly absolutely recognising the work of the wider youth sector, both the voluntary and our own targeted youth workers as well. And I know Simon has dropped a request to speak in. Lots of work going on in that arena. The more we understand the demands and the needs of our young people, the more that we understand the problems that they're facing, the better able we are to produce responses to that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Chairman?
Yeah, you may, Tony. Yeah.
Very briefly, just to say thank you very much. We're working very closely with the targeted area youth worker.
Great.
So we would like to use that route to do the work here locally. We look forward to an ongoing conversation. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you, Tony.
I agree, and I think building on Tony's point, I think if we're looking at 12.6, my view is that there's a lot of support in schools and for young people that are victims of domestic abuse, but actually there's very little in terms of direct behaviour change for the perpetrators of domestic abuse. So if you've got a young person that may be a perpetrator of domestic abuse, what we want to do is break that chain early on, and I can't really see anything that's specifically related to behaviour change for young people. I don't know if anyone wants to come on that. I'll tell you what, Simon, as you want to speak anyway. Simon, do you want to speak to that as well as Tony's point? Simon Fraser-Brown.
Good morning, Councillor. Simon Fraser-Brown. I'm the service manager for the Adolescent Service, and I have one of my roles is to oversee targeted youth work. It's difficult for me to comment specifically on. I'm not aware of any programmes within Dorset that are specifically available for perpetrators of domestic abuse from adolescents. But we have in the past done work one-to-one with young people where that is a concern. And in particular, I think it feels to me as though what the question is looking at is where a young person is perpetrating domestic abuse towards another young person rather than domestic abuse within the household. But I would certainly suggest that Councillor Coombs continues that dialogue and for other members, if they are concerned about that, to identify who the targeted youth worker is in their area. And I think there are opportunities for us to work in partnerships through our local youth centres where there is hopefully a safe space for us to be able to provide that kind of provision and potentially develop programmes if they're not available. And again, I think if we identify that there's sufficient numbers of young people that require this more intensive support, then I think we would need to explore what programmes have been developed and look at how we could then potentially upskill the relevant staff within Dorset to be able to deliver those programmes. I'm not sure I can comment much further than that.
Yeah, I think like coming from looking at the adults point from an adult view, they have things like the Break the Chain programme, etc. And I think that's really powerful. And if we could do that for our young people, I think what I don't want to have is intervention from when we're to 30, 40-year-olds coming out of multiple broken relationships going one for another. If we can get them there early on, then fantastic. Where are we up to? Sort of lost. Okay, so hold on. I need to scroll. Who was next talking? I've got a feeling it is Tony Sorry, I've got Tony Alford, then I've got Molly, then I've got Beryl.
It sounds as though I'm going back in time, and I am, because I just want to make a response to Andy Frost's response to my earlier comment. And I just want to say is I understand completely that we want to take advantage of all the work that we have done in the past, and if we have a structure that can take it forward, then I understand the logic of using it. So I don't dispute that in any way at all. But I do have an expectation down the line that you know, the government, central government, might have the expectation that we have this local partnership board functioning as a dedicated organisation, an organisation dedicated to tackling the issue of domestic abuse. And I just get a bit worried if we are not able to demonstrate sometime down the line that we do have that in place. So by all means use the CSP as a structure, but I think in any meetings and in any minutes it ought to be able to demonstrate that it's acting in the role of domestic abuse board as opposed to its other responsibilities. Just getting it organisationally working correct that will satisfy central government, and we can say the right things in the reports that we need to issue to them. So that's it. Thank you.
Fab. Andy Frost, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That makes perfect sense, and we would want to make sure that it's very clear that those functions are incorporated in the terms of reference for that group. But Councillor Alford's point about making it clear in minutes and making it prominent, absolutely, that's very helpful.
Fab. All right then, I've missed out Molly. So I'm going to go to Molly, then I'm going to go to Beryl.
Thank you. Please do not reinvent the wheel. There are organisations that do this work with children and young people. And I understand what Tony says about youth clubs. Our youth club has been running now since we were closed from the Dorset Council. We've had people come in and do work with our young people. There are organisations out there, Safe Partnership, who are based in Wareham. They used to deliver to schools and youth clubs all the time, and other youth organisations. I mentioned earlier on New Waves. I mentioned STARS. There are people already doing the work and doing the work well and having results. The important thing with children and young people is to deliver the right sort of programme that they can understand, not something that, not learn a new way of doing it. Talk with people who've done it and done it already and see how that works. It's also about thinking about the trauma element of it, the ACEs element, the children and young people that have lived in the trauma. And also, as a young person, they have seen the perpetrator get their own way by their behaviour. So of course, young people, they want to win. They're going to take over that same role. We are seeing younger and younger adolescents coming, talking about abusive relationships that they are in and they don't know how to get away from. I'm talking about people even 11 and 12, because people are having relationships, intimate relationships, a lot younger time on time now. I'm sorry, because I'm so passionate about this.
No, not at all, Molly. It's really lovely.
I don't apologise either, because there is no need to apologise.
Don't apologise, especially when it comes to domestic abuse. We want the right outcome. Beryl, Councillor Azard.
Yeah, thank you. I'm trying to, yeah, yes. Thank you. I wanted to say what a tremendous amount of work that Molly's done and absolutely carrying on with as well. And also, I would like to say that actually, like Tony Coombs was saying, that there is a lot of work going on in the youth clubs in signposting problems for vulnerable families, children as well, and has been going on in certainly the Wareham Youth Centre over the last year. and trying to keep up with the mental health, the abusive families and all that sort of thing. So I mean, we're trying to keep tabs on stuff, if you know what I mean, and targeting obviously to the necessary people to deal with it. But we're working in a lot with one-to-ones and walk and talk and things like that, and seed and CAMS, and actually there is a lot of local work being done as well. And I've just come from a LAG meeting that we've had in Purbeck, and it really is tremendous, the amount of work that's going on, and it does need to be all brought together, and actually everybody feel that they're being actually appreciated, because I think some people feel that they're working on their own when it really ought to be brought together. And I think this assembly thing that Tony Alford's talking about is a jolly good idea. Thank you.
Fab, thank you, Beryl. Who's probably best to answer to highlight Beryl's points? Simon, do you want to? You're probably best placed for that. Are you happy to come in?
I can come in. Apologies, I was unable to find the buttons quickly enough.
That's all right. I'll leave that there. I'll make a copy later.
So I mean, I would really welcome that the comments that Councillor Azard has made. It was very much in line with our locality model. We have been working closely with all of our voluntary and community sector partners, including our youth centres, about the importance of signposting when they're identifying an issue that a child or a family or a young person faces that they're not able to deal with themselves, and hopefully with the appointment of the targeted youth workers, effectively that will be a link worker in the same way as Mark talked about schools having a link worker. So if there is a scenario where a youth centre is unsure as to where to signpost, that they have a direct point of contact that they can kind of take that advice. So I'm not sure I can comment much further than that. Is there anything specifically that I missed?
No, I think you've nailed it there. I think that's all good. I'm going to go to Pauline, and then I'm going to go to Ryan, and then I'm going to wrap this up. We've had a nice chunk of time on it. Pauline, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, shall I formally propose the recommendation in any case, so you've got that done and dusted? But my comment was going to be about moving our thoughts to the other end of the age spectrum, and it concerns me that adult care, adult social care, may perhaps sometimes miss, I hope not, but miss domestic abuse because someone's health has deteriorated. Maybe someone who's older and been a controlling person, we move then into Parkinson's or Alzheimer's or whatever, and the pressure on the caring partner becomes far greater, and that morphs into a position of domestic abuse. For example, I was one of a small group of people supporting a lady who was in a situation with an ailing husband over many years, and I was the one who was to go and grab her when she said, "I've had enough." The phone call came through at the weekend to actually say she'd hanged herself because the pressure had got too great. And I just wonder how often we pick up a situation that's become intolerable, which is really not just about health, it's about domestic abuse. So I would like to be assured that our adult care services are adequately alert to those situations, don't just see it as a consequence, just don't note it down as a health issue.
That's a really good point, isn't it? And I think someone said to me, I think it was Kay Wilson White, said that there's obviously that oh no, it wasn't, but that it's a case of the especially in the older generation, it's one of the fastest growing areas of domestic abuse. What I'll do is I've got Andrea Breen here, and I think Andrea's probably best placed to actually give you that reassurance. Pauline, Councillor Batstone. Andrea, do you want to just come in?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Batstone. A really, really important cohort of people to highlight. Certainly, we'll be addressing some of this through our training programs internally, and that's been reflected as part of Andy's report. But we've also undertaken some learning from a Safeguarding Adults review, where indeed, sadly, this has been brought to our attention again. So some assurances. I think we need to be thinking about how we reflect that back through the Safeguarding Adults Board as well. Because, you know, as you say, this is often a hidden group of people, and we need to make sure that staff are supported to be having those conversations, often at a very difficult time. As I say, we're addressing some of that through our quality assurance processes internally in adult social care, and addressing it through our training of staff as well.
Amazing, thank you, Andrea. That's really good. And I think Tony Meadows wants to come in as well. Tony, do you want to add to Andrea?
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, obviously talking from my perspective as sort of the acting corporate director for commissioning for adult social care, and I think the key thing is that obviously this isn't just about our own staff in terms of the council. This is obviously a lot of our care is provided by external agencies that we contract with. And I think one of the opportunities that having a more formal legal framework does have is it gives us something as well that we can push on from a contractual point of view in terms of obligations of those providers that are out there to be engaging with their staff teams, making sure that they are trained adequately, and they can also be the eyes and ears to be able to feed in. That is the case with safeguarding anyway. But I think that extra focus now that we've got around domestic abuse is something that we can be more specific in, even into the terms of something that we monitor and we ensure that is actually in our contracts in the future, because we are just about to start working on our new care framework. And my ambition would be that that is fully embodied into that piece of work.
Amazing, thank you, Tony. I'm going to go to Ryan Holloway, Councillor Ryan Holloway.
Thank you, Chair. No, just to obviously, I'll be short and sweet here, Chair, because I know you want to move the agenda on, but just to appraise Councillor Molly Relly for the amazing, work she's been doing over the years, and this is a good step in the right direction with this bill. But just one of the things I certainly wanted to echo with the committee, really, Chair, is particularly with mental health as well, particularly particularly with people who do obviously unfortunately do suffer from domestic abuse. It's also the aftermath of those unfortunate events that can lead to obviously issues with mental health and everything. And of course, mental health has been a big, enormous sort of challenge it has, particularly with the pandemic as well over the course of the year. And I know that Councillor Reddy has echoed, repeated, saying that there are many organisations out there that have been helping. So I would just like to really echo that we must also ensure that we do what we can to obviously to help with the aftermaths of that as well. So thank you, Chair.
Fab, thank you, Ryan, and that's really nice because that rounds it up nicely. So just to reiterate, we've got a few outcomes there relating to data and working across the council and health and wellbeing. We've got some other outcomes regarding our young people, and then on the other end of the scale, we've got some outcomes regarding our older people. But ultimately, I think it just falls on us now. Thank you, Ryan, for thanking everyone. But I'll just touch on that. I love it. It's all full of acronyms, isn't it? We've got the MARIC, we've got the HERDA, we've got our housing teams, we've got the CSP, we've got our adults and children's services, and our domestic abuse charities that have worked really hard over the pandemic. And I think it's really good that we recognise the work that they do. So on that notice, I've had Pauline that's proposed the recommendation, and if I can just get everyone's support, that'd be fantastic. And by that, if there's anyone that dissents, say now. Fabulous. All right, then I take it that we're all in support of that. Brilliant. Thank you, and thank you, Andy, and thank you, Molly. Oh yeah, you got one more. Sorry, someone wants to come in.
Sorry, no, Andrew. It's just you need a seconder, so I'd second that motion.
Cheers, buddy. Thank you. I do need a seconder. There we go, done. All right, let's crack on. We have got, okay, the care leaver offer. The portfolio holder is Andrew Parry. Andrew, are you here? Do you want to present, or oh, sorry, no, it's Simon Faze-Brown to present. So Simon, would you like to present? And we'll have a look at our care leaver offer. There we go. Right, Simon.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Members that are currently present, those of you that are a member of the Corporate Parenting Board will be aware that this has been under development, as I reported back in November. So what has been shared with you is a sort of outline as to what is covered by the care leaver policy, and I believe the spreadsheet, so the actual detail of the individual financial provision that we will be making has also been sent to members. So I won't talk for very long. I'll just give a brief overview of where we are. So currently our financial provision to our care leavers is based on a case-by-case basis. We manage our budget in that way. So we have a budget which has remained fairly static, which has been a challenge for us, and hence why we've adopted this approach. One of the reasons for the change is that we feel at the moment there is a risk, because we work on a case-by-case basis, that we are not equitable in our financial support to our care leavers. And so what this framework does is set out the entitlement that our care leavers have in certain situations. And it also brings us in line with statutory guidance around an expectation that all of our care leavers will have a £2,000 setting up home grant. So that's where we are. The kind of key provisions that are within this, we will be providing financial support in setting up home and enabling our care leavers to live independently. We will be providing financial support around education, employment and training. And we will be providing financial support to enable our care leavers to keep in touch with family members. So there's provision in there for travel support and the right to visit home, etc. There's some provision around pregnancy and maternity where that applies to some of our care leavers, which it does at any one time or another affect a number of our care leavers. And there is also a provision in there around emergency provision. So we recognise that our care leaver population is diverse. We're currently supporting 250, I think it's 257 this week. It goes up and down according to when birthdays fall, etc. And at different times, our care leavers will require emergency financial assistance. So we've built in there a budget for them over the 3 years between the ages of 18 and 21 for emergency provision. So that might be when they've got a bill that they hadn't allowed for, those MOTs, or a shop that they can't quite afford, or something comes up as a series of birthdays in a row, whatever that is. There is a provision in there for them to draw down some of that £700 emergency provision. I've noticed in the chat there is our duty as corporate parents. So do you want me to speak to that as well, Councillor?
I was going to get Mark to do it, but what I was just going to say is, for me as a corporate parent, I think it's that recognition that we're all corporate parents in the council, yes, that we all have that role, and you know full well that I take it quite literally, and I believe that we are the ultimate advocates for our young people, and I try to think in a mindset as a parent, and I'm really unashamed. I'm a pushy corporate parent.
Sure. Okay.
But I was going to actually ask Mark to speak to it, but if you want to take it, then fab.
I'm more than happy to, Chair, if I may.
Sure.
Just to follow on from what you've said, absolutely, we should view these young people who have been in our care as our own individual children. As a group of corporate parents, yes, but absolutely we would want to put our best foot forwards in terms of supporting young people as they step out into what is a wild and different world to the one that they may have experienced before. And if we all reflect on those early steps in our lives as we went forwards, the people who were able to support us, the people who we would wanted to have supported us as we're stepping out, those are our responsibilities as corporate parents. So absolutely brilliant to hear, as as an enthusiastic corporate parent, Councillor Kirby, that shines through, and I know it shines through for many of our councillors. This is a genuine responsibility that we have to be able to support our young people as they take their first steps going forwards into housing, as they're taking their first steps becoming more and more independent, and that is always with that view that we must have, which is to enable them to become the people who they want to be and they should be within our place, within their place in society. So our challenge is absolutely to support our young people, to give them those first steps, to support those first steps, and the paper that we brought to you this morning, which Simon has been instrumental in drawing together, absolutely gives some of that financial grease behind the wheels in order to make sure that we're able to do that in an effective and timely manner, but also reflecting on that fact that we have that wider duty of love and care for them as individuals as they go forwards. And we don't want to be in a position where we're letting them go, in a sense, as no parent ever lets their child go. We just need to support them as they make those first steps out into society. So really do encourage councillors to step forward and to say, we support this paper wholeheartedly.
That's really lovely, Mark. Thank you. I'm going to go to Ryan Holloway and then Tony Alford. Ryan, Councillor Holloway.
Thank you, Chair. And obviously, like yourself, I'm also an enthusiastic corporate parent as well. As both you and I know, we do sit on the board, but obviously, I totally agree with you. We are all corporate parents. We are, as a whole, and certainly, this particular, giving that sort of extra sort of help to our care leavers is absolutely vital. It is, because, as Mark Blackman has just said there, it doesn't just stop at 18. It's always that important transition of helping them get further independence. It is, and of course, helping them move into more adult lives. So this is that is extremely important, and as you said, we are all corporate parents, and and these are our young people that we have a duty for care for. So it is really good to see this. Thank you, Chair.
Brilliant, thank you, Ryan. I'm going to be cheeky and I'm going to pop to Councillor Andrew Parry as the portfolio holder, if he'd like to add anything in. Then I'll go to Tony Alford and then to Daryl. Andrew, do you want to pop in?
Thank you to the committee. Apologies for what may appear like queue jumping, but I very much grateful to you for welcoming this report. As you know, I am as passionate about our care leavers as I'm about our children in care. To me, they're not our care leavers. They remain our responsibility in our eyes, long beyond those statutory limits that we see of birthdays. Ultimately, what this is hoping to achieve is that settled adulthood, that aspiration that we have for our young people, that they find themselves in a happy and settled environment, that they're able to flourish and that they're able to achieve their ambitions, and that we want to support them in helping to achieve those ambitions. Happy to take any questions from colleagues. I hope what is becoming clear is that as we have rolled out Blueprint for Change, as we have got our own house in order as a children's services, we are able to further our work in those areas of aspiration that we want to see, and this is very much part of that work.
Fabulous, thank you, Councillor Parry. Thank you, Andrew. I'm going to go to you, Tony Alford.
Thank you. Once you study the detail accompanying this report, it is quite clear that not very much money is being asked to do an awful lot. And I'm bound to say that I support generosity in this area, and also the consistency of approach that we are suggesting. And I would be very happy to move the recommendation.
Brilliant, thank you, Tony. I'm going to go to, I've got Pete Barrow, Councillor Barrow, and then I've got Stella Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, being new to all of this, it's all of this is a learning curve, but the intent and the spirit behind all of this seems absolutely fabulous, and I concur with everything that's been said about being a good corporate parent. Just got a couple of questions really. One is Andrew Parry's point. Why do we have to stop at 25? These in effect, these children are part of our family, the life, if you like. Do care leavers themselves have a role in supporting other care leavers, younger care leavers, you know, acting as mentors? And Tony Alford's point again, is the money actually enough?
Councillor Parry, would you like to answer that question and those points there?
Gosh, that's a fabulous question, Pete, and Councillor Barrett. Is it enough money? It's certainly the money that we have in the budget. Therefore, we would feel that, you know, it will meet a need that we've identified. Would I welcome bigger budgets on matters like this? I certainly think we're going to have to consider that. We are aware that we've had a greater number of children in care, and therefore we are going to find ourselves in a position of having a greater number of children exiting our care. I'm very much like the idea of one authority that discussed the notion that no child ever leaves care. They can knock on our door when they're 35 years old, and let's have a chat to them and see what's going on in their lives. They remain with us as a corporate body, you know, in that sense of well-being, well beyond those statutory dates of 18 or 25 or wherever you want to put those markers in the sand, because things can come back in your life way down the line, way past those notional dates, that you may need support with. And actually, we should perhaps have a flag in the systems that say, okay, you're 34, you come back to us with something that has slightly unresolved from your 20s. Let's see what that's all about. Let's see what we can do with that. I'd very much welcome work in that direction. In terms of mentoring of people, you know, absolutely. If we can take the positives of it, and some people have incredibly positive experiences of care, let's understand that. You know, that we want them to come into our care for their greater good, and ultimately, in many cases, to protect them. If we can use that in order to help those who are in the earlier stages of care or exiting the care systems as we understand them, and create that settled adulthood, that's the point we all want to get to in life. You know, we want to come out of those childhood experiences and find ourselves in a settled home environment where we don't have those worries around security of tenure of our accommodation. You know, there are sometimes references to things like appropriate types of accommodation, and we know that for some of our young people, they are not in appropriate accommodation at the moment. Mercifully, those numbers are very low, but nevertheless, they still exist, and obviously we want everything we can do to address that.
I've actually been cheeky and I've missed out Daryl. Daryl, do you want to come in now?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Let me just get my paper out. I'm going to take this in a slightly negative direction. I'm looking at 9.5.4, which talks about the costs. I've no issues with the paper or the recommendation at all, so please accept that. But what I see is 2 minutes into setting the budget on the 16th of February, we're predicting an overspend. And I would like to know why this wasn't part of the budget planning process. We're looking there at a 7% increase. I understand that you're looking at taking monies from one element and actually spend them somewhere else to rectify that overspend, but it is still an overspend 2 weeks after our final budget. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Kirby, I can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I was just going to bring you in. Do you want to come in?
Sure.
Thank you.
I think, in fairness, the development of this framework has taken place over the last few weeks, and therefore it's been difficult to know the exact figures. We've been working very hard to bring that overspend down, and certainly when I inherited this project back in the summer, the overspend was significantly higher than that, and we've done a lot of detailed work to try and set the policy at something which is realistic. The projected overspend in there is 24,866. Since this paper was produced, we have continued to do quite detailed work, and as I said at the beginning, we've got about 250 care leavers currently being worked with and supported by our personal advisor team within the care leaving service. And that detailed work has been to go back over those young people in terms of who is currently open to us and look at previous spend. So that's 17 personal advisors looking back over 250 plus young people and looking at what money they have received already that we would deem to be part of that Leaving Home grant. So some of that fund, I would actually anticipate of that £24,000, I actually would anticipate we would come in at less than that amount of money. And so I think, but I also acknowledge that, yes, it's not ideal when we've set the final budget, but it is very difficult. This is, if only our care leavers would have their birthdays all on the 31st of March, it would be so much easier to project exactly what we would spend. But it's quite a complex piece of work, as you might imagine. And I would anticipate managing some of that with how we go forward. So I would be expecting that to come in at less than that overspend.
Yeah, but Daryl, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, if I could, please, Andrew. I still think the concern is that this probably took the few weeks, were 2 weeks from the budget on the 16th of February. So this element appears to have been known, and it's the fact that we didn't put it in the budget and didn't put the figure in that line that concerns me. This is one line, 7% overspend. How many other lines are there going to be in the future? It's a worry. I'm happy that you're managing it by borrowing money from another area, but I think we still need that very, very close control on this budget, which I spoke about many times in the past. And like I say, 2 weeks in, just not overly happy. Thank you.
Chairman, if I may just, at your discretion, come back on that.
Yeah.
Obviously, the budget is written at a very high level for its publication. We are well aware that the finance systems that we have tracking in the council as a whole are subject to an element of review as we speak, and that granular detail that we would like to see much more visible earlier on, I hope is something that we'll be having a greater understanding of during the course of the year.
All right, Mark Blackman, did you want to add anything to that?
Yes, just to support Andrew's point, really, which is, and Simon's, where we wrote this paper is during the budget build process, but a long way away from those initial building moments, if you like. The Lego bricks were all in place. And what we've done here is to present a paper which says there could be a cost pressure. It's not a guaranteed cost pressure, but there could be a cost pressure. So we're in a position where we're saying this is what we think worst case scenario might be, as Simon says. It's a predictive model that we're using, and we're looking at redressing some of the inequalities that occurred in the past to bring us to a position where we've got effective provision for our care leavers. So I think to respond to Councillor Turner, I think what we're saying is there's a thing here that we need to keep an eye on. We need to be very careful with all of our spending right across children's services. Absolutely, we understand that. But this is one area where we're able to say, if worst came to worst, it would be this. But our work will always be continually throughout the next 12 months and beyond to bring ourselves in within our budgets as far as we possibly can, recognising the fact that these are need-led situations. And I don't believe that any councillor would want us to be in a position where we're saying, no, sorry, we can't meet your need because we don't feel we've got the exact amount of money within our budget to the nearest £2,000. You know, we are in a position where there are clear demands on service right across children's services. This has been an extraordinary year, and what we are trying to do is to put a position forward that says this is what we think we should do for our young people. It might have a cost pressure on us, but it's one that we think we can manage within the broader piece of children's services, and I would want to continue that support for it.
All right, I've got Stella, and then I've got Rebecca.
Yeah.
Stella Jones. So
I'd like to welcome this. Sorry, I'd like to welcome this. I think it's so important for us to help youngsters when they're setting off onto their independent life. It's so easy for them to be set back if they can't afford something as simple as cutlery or crockery. And I do know it's important to support youngsters all the way, like Andrew said, after the 25 as well. You do that with our own families, we must do with it with corporate parenting. There's one thing, and I think talking about the money, hopefully, because of our aim to have less children entering care, the money will actually get less over the years, because we do hope that we can keep families together more easily than we have done in the past. Can I ask about 933? You say that in the future you might aspire to pay some winter fuel payments. Is the future next year, or is it in 10 years' time, or do we not know? Could we have a report on that before next winter?
Simon, do you want to come back and answer Councillor James's point?
Yeah, I'm happy to report on that for next year. I think that the aspirations are in there because I think they're things that we feel that we should do, but we don't have a legal obligation or a statutory obligation to do. But we think they're things that we should do. The challenge, as Mark has said, is always trying to do the right thing whilst doing so within the context of the budget that we have available to us. And I think it's about seeing our care leavers within the bigger context of the work that's going on in children's services to reduce our numbers of children in care. So my anticipation would be as our numbers of children in care comes down, so we would anticipate fewer young people needing to be supported via our care leaving budget, and therefore we would be able to enact that. It's very difficult for me to give an exact time as to when we would be able to do that, because I think it's within that context that Mark and Teresa operate in terms of the bigger budget for children's services. But it's also somewhat dependent on what happens with our care leaver population. So although the number of children in care is coming down, there is a sort of a time lag between when that then feeds through into the care leaving service, because there are young people currently in care, even if they return home, that would still qualify for a care leaving service. So that's probably a medium to a sort of 2 to 3 years. I would still anticipate our care leaver numbers being as high as they are, and actually potentially increasing over the next 2 to 3 years, and then a longer term reduction of that as the wider work within children's services starts to reduce those numbers. So I think probably we're talking 2 to 3 years time, but if there is scope to do it, I would be happy to enact a winter fuel payment going forward. We were able to access some external funding this year that supported our care leavers around the winter time, but yeah, we would aspire to do that in the longer term. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got Rebecca Knox now, and then we'll pass through it. Rebecca.
Hi there. Thank you. I'm slightly going to take advantage of having the right people speaking about this report about another aspect. It's not necessarily about children who leave our corporate parenting world and become care leavers, but it's actually some young people, and I don't know the number, but they actually become almost like their care leavers because they're thrown out of their family home at the age of 18. And I'm wondering, and it might be domestic abuse or other issues. I know we've just discussed tight budgets, but there's a really good element of signposting and assistance, which is obviously available for care leavers. Are we linking this up to that other sector of care leavers who are over the age of 18, and in effect we do have a duty to give that advice if at all possible, or where does that fit in to our holistic plan for the health and well-being of those 18 to 25-year-olds who are very vulnerable?
That's a really good point, Rebecca. I've just put in the chat who wants to answer Rebecca Knox, because I'm trying to work out where it fits. Is it children's or is it adults? And I think that might be the story of Dorset Council. But Mark Blackman's got in there. So Mark, take it away.
Yes, thank you, Rebecca. Absolutely, it's a huge challenge, isn't it? For some of our children, as they go from children to adult, they are part of other services elsewhere. So SEND services, for example, and others. But we wouldn't want to be the council where people fall through the cracks, and that conversation that we are having as an ongoing piece, which is that crossover from children to adults, the young adult, the 18s to 25s, huge challenges in that area for some, and making sure that we are able to signpost and wrap around all of our services, be they adults or children's, or that crossover, I think is really, really important. I know Andrew wants to come in and say some things about that, but certainly in terms of our support to young people, families excluded from, actually Andrew's dropped in the comment line, Andrew Billany, housing is a really important part of that piece of work, and understanding that we don't want young people in a difficult position. We want to support them through that continuum from 18 through to 25, and obviously our statutory responsibilities come in, but also our care responsibilities too.
All right, okay, I'm going to bring in quickly then. I want to bring in Andrew Billany and then Tony Meadows, and then I'm going to get Anthony Alford to speak, and then I'm going to make my points as chair. I can do that, and then we'll wrap this up. So, Andrew.
Yeah, it's interesting. A very quite broad question, but just there's a narrower point of that is around that kind of the transition between young people into adulthood. We're doing a lot of good work across the council, certainly housing and children's services, about making sure we're dealing well with somebody who comes the family exclusion point, somebody who's thrown out of the family home. It's particularly prevalent at the moment with COVID pressures. So to make sure we're dealing with that sensibly, and some of the work we're doing with children's services, Sarah Jane Smedmore, is about making sure that's very practical, seamless advice. So it could be about getting people, and this could be a care leaver, but it could be another young person at risk, where we're giving people the right kind of advice, which gets them private rented property, which gets them accommodated and settled. I mean, it's not a particularly focused answer, but I think it's a point that we're working on, because there's fairly various sort of potential clunky parts of this work that sort of that sometimes puts individuals at risk if they're moving from that, if they're sort of 20, 21 and have a and had a fairly volatile work. So short answer is we're working on making sure that's as seamless as possible, but it's certainly on our radar that the potential for the rise in homelessness because of family exclusions.
All right, thank you. Cheers, Andrew. I'm going to go to Tony Meadows, and then I'm going to go to Tony Alford. So Tony Meadows, do you just want to quickly add something in?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I mean, one bit's just a little bit of a reminder in terms of, yes, we do talk about care leavers, etc., but young carers are sometimes disadvantaged through their caring duties, and may not be people that are always on our radar. Obviously, we do work with young carers, etc. But again, it's just being mindful that there's wider cohort. But then I suppose that's my second part is we do have other areas of support for people going through that transition. And from adults' point of view, we do have an emergency fund for white goods, etc., for when people are actually going through that sort of transition period, and even in sort of slightly older areas. So I think, in a way, what we've got here is a piece of work which is a really good piece of work, focusing on the need and for a fund to support a particular cohort of people. But in a way, what it demonstrates is that we sometimes run the risk of fragmenting things a little bit, because there are so many different facets, and maybe it's about how do we actually map all of those things so we get a clear view of what is actually available from the authority's perspective. Just a thought.
Yeah. Okay, fab. Yeah, that's really in depth. Thank you, Tony. Tony Alford, Councillor Alford.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to make one point in regard to Councillor Darrell Turner's point, and this is to go back to the budget meeting we had, and there was a remark during the debate made by the Director of Finance that a figure of 75,000 being referred to then was below the level of materiality for budgetary purposes. So it does seem to me that if 75,000 is below the materiality level, then 25,000 is even further below the materiality level. So I think there's a sort of a sense of scale there that we need to recognise. Having studied, as I said earlier on, the detail, I do believe we are being careful and not extravagant. And finally, I just make a point which has been triggered by something that Rebecca said, and it does make me wonder how well we give our young people training in budgeting. a valuable skill that I think if we can enable them to benefit from that, that could be a real valuable life lesson. So I do just wonder how well we do that, perhaps also how it is done. Thank you.
That's a really good point about budgeting there, and I think that's something that's been taken up by the Corporate Parenting Board. Darryl, I'm going to give you the right to speak on Tony's point, and then I am going to come in because I want to move forward.
The point is about the materiality of the figure. It's not. It's the principle of the issue. Have an overspend, 7% overspend, on one line of the budget. 2 weeks after the budget's been set, I don't think is a very clever way forward. It's just that the issue will be how many more of these single line overspends will there be? We know it's a frail budget. We really need to control it. Thank you.
Okay, all right. I'm going to make my points now. Thank you, Darryl. And actually, I agree with Darryl. I don't begrudge the money going to our young people, to our corporate children. In fact, quite the opposite. But I think there's a lot more that we can do out there to be able to reduce the price. And I think some of that is about actually approaching organisations and to be able to help support our young people. So there's organisations out there that will be able to help and support that. And I think that one of the things that we touched on a while back was looking at things like carpets and setting up homes, etc. Now there are organisations that will quite happily donate bits and pieces to our young people, so therefore they've got further funding to be able to spend on things that they actually want to do. But I think the other thing I want to touch on is perhaps we're not being brave enough about our duties as corporate parents. And we touched on MOTs. I tell you what, Simon touched on it earlier. And I think, look, as a council, we provide a lot of services. And one of those, funnily enough, are MOTs. And you think, well, why can't we give our own children MOTs? Because we've got the knowledge and the ability to do it. So I'd really push to see if we can get our children, young people, MOTs. The second one is about driving. Now, my parents taught me to drive, albeit badly, and I think we should be doing the same. And the same with our corporate fleets. We have a corporate fleet of cars. When they come to the end of their useful life, why are we not passing it down towards our young people? We all inherit a banger, don't we? And I think that's really important. So I think it's just being able to think outside the box, really, in terms of what else can we deliver for our young people at not a really massive cost. So and what else can other organisations bring in to be able to support our young people in terms of reducing that cost, so we can spend more on them. So I think that's me done, really. I think what we'll do, there we go, I like that. Mark Blackman's got happy to take away the outside the box conversation, because I think that's what really we're here for today, isn't it? Is getting those policies out. How do we support our children? But I've got a proposer, and I've got Pauline. Are you happy to second that?
Yes, Chairman.
Yeah. I'm
Yes.
happy. It brings about that equity, and I think that's really important that our young people, our children, are treated fairly. And I'm going to assume that we're all in favour. Yeah, excellent. Okay, fab. All right. So moving on, and thank you, Simon, for that. That was fab, and thank you, Mark. We will crack on to the Harbour project. I want to call it the Harbour project, but I don't know if it's called the Harbour or the Harbour project, and that's agenda item 6. And that's a presentation by Louise Drury.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kirby, and thank you very much for inviting me here today. I just want to be open and transparent. I have been presenting in a number of the local alliance groups, and so can see familiar faces at this meeting too. So apologies if you're seeing it again, but I hope there's something new in it every time you see it. So could we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So in order to really sort of start our conversation about the harbour, I think it's really helpful to just really ground this in our overarching children and young people's plan that takes us up to 2023. And as you can see there, the good care provision for children and young people when they need it, where they need it, and for as long as is necessary. And this is where the harbour is really responding to. Next slide, please. And so our aim, so we know that we have too many of our young people are placed away from their families, their communities, and things that they are familiar with, such as school, friends, etc. And so therefore our real aim is to keep our children close to home and to be that best corporate parent that we've been talking about today in this committee meeting. Where we can, we want to support our families to stay together, but where that's not possible, our value base is that our children and young people should be brought up within a family-based care setting, so with our foster placements, if that's not through families or extended family. And also we want to make sure that our young people have the right educational and housing options. We are really focusing on improving the health and well-being of our young people, and also ensuring that there are a range of short breaks available to support families with children with special educational needs to be able to continue to care for their children. Next slide, please. And so we can see that in Dorset we are seeing a major change in strategic direction for our children's services and are returning to the direct provision of children's homes by Dorset Council. We can see that also that we have a legacy of increased numbers of young people entering care in their teenage years, with too many placed away from their families, schools, communities and Dorset. And so we're wanting to develop a systemic approach to working with young people who are on the edge of care, in care and also leaving care. And the Harbour is this whole system service for our more complex and troubled young people. Next slide, please. And with the Harbour approach, and what I'll come on to another slide in a moment, which talks about exactly what it is in more detail, but we are wanting to and will see the safe reduction of the need for our young people to come into care, and also fundamentally change the pattern of those repeated disruptions for those who struggle to engage, struggle to engage with, and also place, and provide young people with the stability, skills and support to successfully manage transitions to adulthood. So, as I've said in previous presentations, we're not just working for today, we are working for when our young people, as Councillor Parry was saying, that steady adult life. So when our young people are 21, 35, 45, 65, 75, and really, the value base of the Harbour is to always have that open door, to be able to pick up the phone, no matter how old you are, to drop in, have a cup of tea, and also, if the shelf's fallen down, well, we'll pop round and give a hand if that's what it takes. But having that sustained relationship and that real stickability, and I think it was mentioned earlier about there being no cliff edges as well. Within the Harbour, we will have an integrated multi-agency team, and by doing that we will be able to reduce the number of assessments that our young people have to experience prior to receiving service. And those assessments can take place in a much more different way. So having our embedded psychologist, speech and language communication practitioner, an assessment may take place on the way to driving a child to school, or maybe a walk along the beach, or over a game of cards, rather than needing to have that formal appointment and formal assessment, but absolutely ensuring that these take place in a much more natural way. And also reducing the need for referrals and handoffs between services. So again, having that embedded team within the Harbour means that the right services are available exactly at the time our young people need them, rather than needing to wait several weeks down the line. And also developing trusting and lasting relationships that can be maintained through a young person's journey and beyond. Next slide, please. So this is the infographic that we have developed, which really describes, well, we hope describes the Harbour. So at the centre you will see a residential hub, and we have property in Weymouth on Dorchester Road. Some will be familiar. This is the old registry office, a beautiful building, which we will be refurbishing and converting into a 3-bedroomed children's home. And within the grounds of that property, we will also be building a modular build, a 5-bedroomed home too. And this will really be the the hub of the harbour. And within that residential space, we will have our multi-agency team, our clinical psychologist, our speech and language communication practitioner, but also our embedded police colleagues. And that really supports us with having a really clear understanding and evidence-based to understanding risk that our children may be experiencing. And also within the team, we have, we are recruiting and have recruited a really fantastic team of youth practitioners who, whilst paying attention, obviously, to their, professional qualifications, but are bringing with them a vast array of, skills, hobbies, passions, so that, we can offer that diverse range of opportunities and activities to our young people as a means of engaging, also raising self-esteem, and really strengthening emotional resilience too. So we have mountaineers, we have paddle boarders, we have hikers, we have also very talented artists too, so that we're not having to outsource that relationship. As you can see, we also have on the yellow ring a range of bespoke accommodation or alternative accommodation options, as well as that residential hub. And really important contributor to that, it will be our specialist foster carers, which we are recruiting to at the moment. And the specialist foster carers will be really well supported by the harbour team as well. So having that wraparound support, so as the sun goes down and it gets a little darker and it gets a little quieter, sometimes it can feel a little bit anxious in terms of, oh, is everything okay? But having the harbour hub being able to be there and respond out of those hours to offer that support and just wrap around shoring up the placement stability will be, we think, is really, really helpful. And also between placements, our foster carers will have the opportunity to provide sessional work within the residential hub. And this really resonates with another one of our values, which is all about relationships. And so being able to have build up those relationships before young people move into to live with them. So having conversations like, well, we know what it's like. If we enter a room, there are always those people who we kind of go, actually, I think I get on with you, or we find much easier to have a conversation with. And there are some that, we just might rub up a little bit against and not get on quite so well with. And it is absolutely the same for our young people. And so being able to have our foster carers building those relationships, having conversations such as, actually you and I get on really well together. Come and, why don't you come and stay for the weekend? Or we're going on holiday, do you want to come with us? Or actually we get on really well, so why don't you come and live with us too? And again, with our supported lodgings, there's a similar arrangement, and being able to reach into the harbour, undertake some of those sessional shifts, building that relationship, so that when young people move out of the residential space, that we are really confident that they are part of that decision making, absolutely, and are identifying carers that they really see having a future with themselves. We also have a shared approach to training, so that our young people are able to work with those that they feel that they have that connection with. So although there may be a need in terms of a psychological intervention, but actually a young person is choosing to really engage with a youth practitioner, then we can absolutely support that through the role of the psychologist in that supervision with the youth practitioner. Also, our approach to shared training will ensure that we are all using the same consistency and are communicating in the same way to our young people. And having our embedded police colleagues who we welcomed to the team this week, absolutely delighted to have them, giving us that evidenced approach to risk. So we're not making decisions based on myth and rumour, but really understand that. Now, we're really clear that whilst we are bringing our residential homes, building those in Dorset, that we don't want this to be a magnet or a reason for increasing the number of young people that are coming into our care. So the biggest ring, the most significant ring, is the outer ring, which is really about the outreach that we'll be providing for our children, with our families, supporting children to remain in the care of their families. So those children who may be on the edge of care or edging towards care. And also being able to wrap around our young people and their carers, to ensure that actually we are reducing the number of times that our young people move from placement to placement. So really shoring up that placement stability. Thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in undertaking this work, we are working with colleagues from North Yorkshire as our partners in practice. And the reason why we're working with North Yorkshire, they have developed an approach called the No Wrong Door. This has been really well evaluated and comes with a really strong evidence base, so evaluated by Loughborough University. And we can see here that in terms of impact of the approach, that if we look at the percentage of missing episodes for young people, 87% reduction. Also, the use of independent fostering agencies, a 96% reduction. A 30% reduction in the number of exclusions from school, and also really strengthening the emotional resilience of their young people. And we expect that to happen exactly the same way for our young people too. Next slide, please. And so, we did sit down with our young people too, who have really helped us craft and develop the approach that we want to deliver in the harbour. We thought that we could actually decide to do many things, but actually really wanted to focus on just doing 6 things because we believe that this will have the greatest impact for our young people. So reducing high-risk behaviour, keeping our children safe, and again, making use of those embedded police colleagues to really understand the risks that our young people may be exposed to, and working collaboratively to reduce that. Also building and restoring relationships to strengthen that placement stability. We know of young people who've had experienced multiple placement moves, recognising that whilst those placement moves may have been necessary for a multitude of reasons, but actually there may have been connections made in those placement moves, in those placements, sorry, and ensuring that there is the opportunity for those relationships to still be there as we move into into adult life too. So it may be through having the opportunity to have Sunday lunch together, or a birthday card, or a telephone call, being there for a conversation. So we're not pushing at the door saying, please can this young person come back to live with you, but still recognizing the range of relationships that can be maintained through that restorative approach. Planning for transitions well before they happen, but also continuing to work alongside during those transitions and beyond those transitions too. Making use of our embedded specialist roles, so our speech and language practitioner, for example, in supporting that achievement in education, training and work readiness, being able to reach into our schools and support with maintaining that inclusion. strengthening self-esteem and resilience, so through that diverse range of activities and opportunities, building up the sense of achievement. You know, we have a really ambitious and aspirational staff team who are going to be going absolutely above and beyond for our young people to make sure that this happens. And also having that flexible staff team too. So a staff team whose contract allows them to stick with a young person wherever they may be. So if working with a young person who is receiving support through outreach, that over time they may need to have a period of time in the residential hub, then it's really important that their key worker is able to have that stretch and flex into that residential hub and be part of that shift work too. And in doing so, then we know that, you know, we will be able to deliver that right and well organised support for our young people who may be presenting in a crisis. Next slide, please. And also, so our shared culture and values, you know, this is really important. This is, you know, what underpins every single day of the work that we're doing. So building trusting relationships, having those restorative approaches, that whole team approach to training, and also really focusing on strengths, yeah, and providing opportunities for, you know, whilst we recognise the value of you know, formal success, but also really celebrating those, you know, opportunities for self-defined success too. Working collaboratively, having that integrated approach, you know, really authentic partnerships with our children, our young people, their families, and our partners too. And having those strong links with partners and communities, really reaching into our communities to affect that positive change. You know, engaging with our businesses, knocking at their door, you know, looking for opportunities for our young people, for work experience, for jobs, for apprenticeships. Next slide, please. And so we want to be sure that what we are doing is having the impact that we expect it to have. And so we are tracking all of our interventions, and you know, if we look at, you know, safety and reducing vulnerabilities, we are wanting to capture and count a reduction in those missing episodes, the number of times that our young people are coming to the attention of police, you know, A&E attendance, change in drug use, alcohol use, and also ensuring that we have those effective multi-agency risk assessments that are intelligence-led. And the strong work that we will deliver with our birth families, making use of family group conferences, longer life links, and having that whole team approach to support placement stability. Stickability of worker, I think, you know, we've mentioned today, you know, that we have, you know, no cliff edges, and so really wanting to support those transitions, and also having the embedded roles supporting better education and achievement outcomes, and then the diverse range of activities and opportunities, and that responsible, flexible team. Thank you. I think that was 2 minutes. How about that, Councillor Kirby? I've just seen
it's really hard because it is just so amazing, isn't it? And it's really lovely to take such a holistic approach. And I know you're very passionate. I didn't want to cut you down.
Well, I know. I just saw it. I thought 2 minutes.
that was 2 minutes. That was fantastic. I think it's brilliant. That's my own view. I mean, what I would love to see is this expanded upon. I'll get in quickly before there you go. Tony Coombs has got a question, but I'll get in there quickly. What I wanted to highlight was the alternative accommodation, and you mentioned foster carers.
Yes.
But I'm also keen on things like respite care, etc. And the activities that we do. I think they're really powerful. I wanted to explore how we use sort of like our outdoor education teams, and they're obviously going to be key to providing a lot of the activities, which is brilliant. And I think that, you know, decent activities lead to well-rounded individuals, and you mentioned how, you know, breaking down the barriers. But how are we going to use the outdoor education team? I've got Paul Burrows here as well. So Louise, I'll leave you to chip in, and then I'll invite Paul Burrows in if that's okay, and then I'll go to Tony Coombs.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Kirby. And I just want to apologise. I've just realised that my camera wasn't on during the presentation, so apologies for that. But it's on now. Yes, in terms of engaging with our outdoor education colleagues, absolutely we'll be doing that and are doing so already, making use of those, and also, you know, sharing that skill base across that space too. Whilst we absolutely are wanting to be a really relationship approach and not outsource the relationship by asking others to deliver things for us. So we want to deliver a lot from within ourselves, but also recognise that as part of, you know, moving towards that independence, it's really important to engage with our voluntary sector so that there is a range of opportunities through volunteering, but also, you know, engaging with our outdoor education colleagues too, which we are doing already, and particularly through our outreach as well.
Paul Burrows, do you want to touch on that? I'm particularly intrigued to see, you know, what you can add in terms of accommodation, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Paul Burrows, Strategic Lead for Outdoor Education. It's wonderful listening to Louise's report there, really, because you know, the intention of this project highlight the outcomes of high quality outdoor education. So I'm particularly thinking along the relationship building and these trusting and lasting relationships. And certainly that the work we do within outdoor education is about living and learning in the outdoors. So in terms of settings and preparing young people for adult life, outdoor education is a really powerful tool for developing those skills. Obviously, we're experts in working along the lines of managing risk and developing self-esteem and resilience as well. So those are outcomes that we see. Ofsted recognises those as outcomes of high quality outdoor education as well. At the moment, we work with young people and with families across our centres, but also I could definitely see a relationship where outdoor education staff are integrated into the team that Louise has mentioned across these localities, working in the relationship with those young people. So when you talk about those walks along the beach, that extends into something a bit more exciting, developing a theme and developing a range of skills and so on. Outdoor education is a big employer within Dorset as well. So again, just thinking longer term about these young people leaving care or leaving education and going into employment, the outdoor education and leisure sector, although being hit hard at the moment with restrictions under COVID, as the recovery from that comes online, more people we're anticipating are going to be spending more time working in the outdoors, and those sorts of jobs are really appealing to some of the young people we're talking about here who might want to be more physically active. So yeah, so my brain's rattling with a number of things, but yeah, those areas around managing risk, anxiety, dealing with anxiety, are really key for us. Thank you.
I think I just wanted to come back and just say, in terms of what I'd love to see is actually the outdoor ed team. You've got plenty of buildings. I'd love to see you as a registered provider. I think that's where I'm going with this, and I think that if Children's Services can help you with that, so that would be an outcome from this meeting that would literally make me so happy. I think that's where I was going with that. Louise has got a wry smile, but I think if we could have the outdoor education centres, not an overflow, but as a place where an additional place where our young people can go as an alternative accommodation, that'd be fantastic. But that's enough for me because I've got other members here. So, Andrew Parry, I know you want to speak, but I'm going to leave you to it for a sec. I'm going to go to Tony Keames, then I'm going to go to Daryl, and then I'll go to Beryl, and then if I've got any time, I'll swing in Councillor Parry. Tony.
Thank you, Chairman. I haven't got a question as such. I just really wanted to say how much I welcome the report, and it's a culmination of so much that I've been involved with in the past over the years, and I really welcome where we're going with it. And I particularly like the comments that Paul was just making about the outdoor ed service. Again, many years involvement with that in the past. Going way back to when I was first elected, umpty-dump years ago, when we were doing our best to save the outdoor service where everyone around was closing it. As for the final slide, how you think you can contribute to the success, just ask. I will do anything I can to help make it a success, even though I'm in the far east of the county. You've got my full support, guys. Well done.
Thank you to Councillor Coombs. That's very welcome, and particularly with the recruitment for our specialist foster carers, I think that would be really welcome.
Okay, fab. I am going to be, sorry, Darryl, I'm going to be cheeky. I'm just going to ask Andrew Parry to come in quickly. I am just aware of time. We've got a few minutes left, but Andrew.
Incredibly brief. The Harbour project is taken on such a transformational role inside the council. It's moved away from where do we keep children for the night to sleep to how do we help these children, young people who have been in incredibly vulnerable positions have a stable time in our care and move on into that settled adulthood that we discussed earlier on. And you know, the more work that we can do in those very early stages to settle them, we've got the greater chance of their placements that follow and any transitions that follow after that being less traumatic for them, and that must be a good thing. The other thing I wanted to reflect on is that in creating Dorset Council, we of course have brought all those district facilities, you know, the Moors Valley Parks and all the rest of it that we have available now to us as one council, and we should be deploying those to the best use for our children in care, and I hope we do take advantage of it. So, you know, supporting this team in outdoor education, you know, there is so much more opportunity now. Please let's embrace it. Thank you.
Fab. Thank you, Andrew. I think that it's absolutely brilliant, isn't it? Okay, right. I'm going to get to Darryl.
Thank you, Chairman. Very quickly, superb paper, fantastic stuff. There was one thing that sort of pricked my ears. You mentioned staying in Dorset, staying close to home, but I just want an assurance that when our young people have the ambition to move away, to broaden their horizons, to improve opportunities, that we are helping those as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Turner. That's a really helpful question, a really welcome question too. Absolutely, through the ambition and the aspiration for our young people, we want to really be assured that they recognise and are part of the big world that we have, and you know, we want to keep our children close who you know, in their childhood, but absolutely giving them that strength, the ambition, the aspiration to really step outside as well and go as far afield as they want to, as part of their own dreams.
Fab. I think that as no one else has an RTS, I'll come in. I think it really relates to our previous agenda item in terms of, you know, what else can the council offer? We've got so many soft skills and we've got so many individuals in the council that are able to do things to support these young people. It'd be really good to see if we can get the rest of the buy-in. Louise, as there's no one else there, I'd just like to say how amazing it is. It's been lovely following the progress of the Harbour project, and I can't wait to come along and visit it when it's slightly more established and COVID's not around. Hopefully you'll have me, and hopefully I can do a little bit of youth work or something and get involved and do an activity. I'll come out with Paul Burrows and we're going to do some kayaking together. So I'm just going to need just to propose that we endorse the. I'll tell you what, there's actually not a recommendation to go with it, but I think it would be useful if we just endorse the Harbour project and endorse the hard work that's gone into it. So if I could just have a proposer and a seconder for that, that'd be amazing.
Can I endorse it and welcome it?
Yeah, there we go. I've got everyone supportive, and that's amazing. So Louise, thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to coming back and revisiting that at a later date.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Amazing, thank you. All right, okay, we will just finish up now with our 4 minutes to go, and we will look at the committee forward plan, which is agenda item 7. I mean, first of all, I'm pleased that I've got Darryl here. So there are a few more workshops that we're waiting to come through. We've obviously got the workshop coming up next week with looking at housing. I mean, I think a workshop is the way to go. I think that for many of these things, they're quite difficult and we can ask difficult questions, and I think that's where I think policy is best made. But also we've got the George, if you want to scroll down a bit, please, we can start looking at the results of the Reset and Recovery AP. So Fiona, it'd be fab if we included those into the forward plan. So I mean, from my point of view, they're all good and they all need to go in there. Yeah, P Barrow.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know whether this is the right moment to mention it, but obviously the schools are going back shortly, and a lot of our children, as we're all well aware, has had a severely disrupted education over the past 12 months. Have we got a piece of work to do here to sort of look into that, find out how much damage has actually been done, find out what the schools are actually able to do about it, whether they need any support, what we can do to monitor the situation and ensure ourselves that it's all getting back on track. So do we have a role with this?
Do you know what, Peter? That's a really good point. Mark Blackman is still around. It'd be really good if we had his comment on that. Mark, do you have a view on that? What can we do that's useful to be able to support our schools?
Thank you, Councillor Kirby, and Peter as well. Absolutely, we have a role, a significant coordinating role is what we have. We're also responsible for the distribution of the Holiday and Activities Fund and a range of other responses across the system. So I'm more than happy to come back as part of that reporting item and to give updates on where we're at, certainly in terms of working out where the provision for children needs to be in terms of what's going to go on in the future. The schools will be starting that next week, and then going forwards looking at our wider response and how that's fitting in with the work that schools will be deployed to do. Very happy to support a report back on that as well.
I think that'd be really useful. I tell you what would be particularly good is if we've had the youth EAP that's come through, but we've also got the youth offer, and it'd be really good if we perhaps combine that with the youth offer and had that as an agenda item, because as you say, we've got things going on over the summer. What support do our schools need? What support do our young people need to be able to help them over into a post-COVID world? Daryl.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'm back on now. I just wanted to mention the undated subjects which came from the Reset and Recovery EAP. Now, those have been dished out between the various 4 committees, and obviously we need to recognise a mechanism for bringing that all back together at the end to actually have a final response to the Reset and Recovery EAP. The thing that concerns me, and we still haven't got a good answer about it, is actually prioritisation of these topics. Now, we've been to the SLT a number of times, and we desperately need for them to tell us what they want to deal with first. And one because obviously they know the future forward plan, and secondly the issue with officer resource. They need to know what manpower is available to actually pick up these topics, run with them, and bring them to committee as soon as we can. So I'm looking really for the SLT to actually help us on the way forward. Thank you.
Daryl's raised a really good point. I think I don't think we have anyone from SLT here, do we? But I think if we give a very clear steer that they need to pull their finger out and get back to us ASAP. I think that's a nice way of saying it. Look, I think we'll draw the meeting to a close. I think that it's 1 minute past 12. There is, let me bring it up. Fiona, there's no other urgent items, are there? And there's no exempt business.
No urgent items, no exempt business. That's correct.
And if we could just add in Daryl's points to the minutes, that'll be fab. And then if we could add in the work to Pete's point about schools exception to forward plan, that'd be fantastic. Otherwise, when's our next meeting?
May, I think. Could you go up to the top of the plan, George? I think it's the 4th of May.
4th of May on the forward plan.
Thank you. I just wanted that confirmed in case I got that wrong. But remember, next week we've got the workshop. So thank you all for coming, and thank you to those officers that have given up their morning to come and support us.